Okay, good morning. We're on 61A at the very top of the Mishnah. Hamatahar yeno shel oved kochavim v'nosno birshuso. Um, So literally this means someone like makes tahor the wine of a kochavim. What it means is that you're basically producing kosher wine for a non-Jew, for on behalf for a like a non-Jew hires you to make kosher wine. So essentially, this is like you're giving a hechsher to wine production, done by a non-Jew. Benos number
So he owns the winery and you're just working for him?
Yes. Or it could be that you own the winery, he hired you to make the wine, but then the key here is no birshusa, that then you give him the wine. Okay, so it's kosher wine. It's made, in an OU certified facility, and then you put it in the non-Jew's warehouse. Um, so now, like now it's no longer under supervision, right? So b'bayis hapatzuach l'rshus harabim, if it's in a building that is visible, open to literally from the public domain, be'ir sheyesh lo ba'od kochavim v'Yisraelim, and it's in a mixed city, meaning that there are Jews as well as non-Jews going by, mutar, then it's okay, then it's kosher. And as we're going to see, the reason is that the like the basic assumption of everything we're doing today is that if the non-Jew has an interest in keeping his wine certified kosher, then he's not going to mess with it because he'll have an economic loss, right? So if it's in, it may be in his under his control now, but since people can see whether he is, they could see him if he goes and moves the wine, makes it yayin nesach, then he won't do it because of the economic consequences. Then people won't buy his wine, and people who keep kosher won't buy his wine anymore. So then it's fine.
So
Um,
he has cameras or monitors in the building and then people can always see, oh, you can watch and see what's going on?
Not the OU, but like if
Or
it's
whatever,
if it's got a
somebody.
window, yeah, right. So now Be'ir Shekulov the Kochafim Usr, but if there are no Jews in the city, then it's a problem. Then you can't have the wine because now he's got nothing to fear, right? None of the idolaters are going to tell on him if he's moving the wine. So
But
that's
then if
still
he
fine.
had cameras there, someone could see it, right? If you have a video
Yeah,
or
yeah,
camera.
that, oh, I see. So yeah, you're saying that now everything is if there are cameras, and they're on the internet, then everything is an Ir Shakul, a city with Jews and non-Jews. Yeah, I
Right.
guess that would make sense, right? But here, obviously, we're not talking about cameras in the context of the war. We're talking about a window, right, where passersby could see what's going on inside. But yeah, it's a great point about cameras. Now, every place on the internet is a place where everybody lives. Um, yeah. Now Shiyoshev Shomer. Shiyoshu Ad Shiyoshu
It's
Shomer.
interesting. Just as an aside, my wife tells me a story. Yeah, many years ago, there was a bakery or someplace on the Lower East Side where
Mhm.
she grew up, and they would bagels or baker, whatever it was. And she said she used to go there Pesach time or near Pesach, and at the end of Pesach, and she would see the workers inside eating their cheese sandwiches,
Oh my God.
even though it was supposedly it was close to Pesach or whatever.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I remember when I was in high school, I had a friend whose father had a bakery, a kosher bakery, and he used to work there, for before Pesach, they sold things from a fridge like yogurt, right? So the Astro yogurt used to deliver yogurt, and one time just before Pesach, my friend Murray, he's overseeing the delivery, and he says to the guys, hey, "This isn't what we ordered. We ordered the Passover kosher, the Passover certified yogurt." And so the guy takes out the stamp. Oh yeah, we forgot. He stamps all the kosher for Pesach. All right. Anyway, so Achi Yoshu Shomer. But what can you do in such a case? If even if you're in a city where there are no Jews, if you pay a guard, a watchman to watch it, a Jewish one, obviously, then it's fine. He doesn't have to be there 24/7. Even though he's just, he coming and going, it's still okay because clearly because the owner he's not going to mess with things because the watchman could come at any time and catch him, and then he'd lose his reputation.
Isn't that part
Um,
of the OUs now? Yotzi v'nichnas in
yes,
many factories.
right, right. And I think it depends on what's being certified. I think if it's like actual meat, kosher meat, I think that might not be sufficient if I remember correctly. But in other situations, Yosef Nichnas is fine. Um, I think that applies to restaurants, maybe. I don't know the details, but yes, Yosef Nichnas is definitely a concept that we utilize. Rabbi Shimon ben Lazar Omer, Rishusov de Kochavim Achasi. Um, so it's not clear what this means right now. We'll see what the Gemara will explain. Um, that uh, that essentially it means everybody, like all the of the Kochavim share their rishus. We'll see in the Gemara what this means. Um, Again, same situation. And the owner, the idol worshiper, the idolater says to him, I got money from you as payment. In other words, he gives him a receipt. Um, Mutar, then the wine is permitted because now, if it's subject to the clause to the conditions we stated before, um, if he's given them a receipt, then he's the one that owns it, the idolater, and he's responsible for maintaining the kashrus if he wants to sell it as kosher wine. So that's when our situation applies. Um, but if um, but if it's a situation where the Jew hasn't paid yet, then it's a problem. This happened in Beishav V'Yasru, and they said not because it's not under the control of the idolater yet. So if people seeing him messing with it, it's not his reputation that's being sullied. And the Gemara will discuss this further. So now the Gemara wants to know, even in why is it a problem if there's a city that's all idolaters and no Jews, but still people come and go, right? Maybe no Jews live in the city, but merchants come all the time. Could be, the idolater would still have to worry that there are wandering Jews, wandering around town, even if they're not residents, and so he would still be afraid to mess with the wine. There are merchants who come and go. Amar Shmuel, Be'ir Sheish Lo Dulsaim V'Riach. Okay, it's a controlled access city. There's a gate. They lock it up at night, right? All Jews have to go home. Sadly, this is not hard to imagine, and I don't know about the time of the Gemara. I'm not that familiar, but certainly in medieval Europe, towns were definitely had walls and gates, and there were plenty of places where Jews were not allowed to be overnight. Even in modern day, like in with the ghettos in Nazi Germany in the Nazi Empire. So
Even
um,
in this country, in certain times, there were country clubs where there were no Jews allowed. And go back
right,
to 30, 40 years ago.
right, and those are controlled access. Yes, absolutely, great example. So if there's a way to keep Jews out, then at least at the time that the gates are locked and the Jews have been excluded, then that's what we would call for our Mishnah a city that is idolaters only. Amar of Yosef, v'chalon b'rshus harabim dame. Um, um, like when the Mishnah talked about a building that's open to the public domain, but Rabbi Yosef is saying, as I actually jumped the gun here, if there's a window, it's the same thing. So, because the key thing is that people should be able to see what's going on inside. Um, and if there's a dump, a trash dump, facing the warehouse, then that's also the same as if it opens into a public domain. In other words, um, people would for whatever reason, people would find the trash dump a place that would be common for people to go there, um, whether they're trash picking or I think once Rashi's suggestion is or the Ron suggestion is that people would relieve themselves there. So it's basically a trash heap is also, even if it's not public domain, it's still a place from where everyone knows that the warehouse can be observed. Also, a palm tree. If a Jew has a palm tree facing the warehouse, then it's also open to view because people would you could climb up the palm tree and then you could see down maybe into the warehouse. Um, so psikreshe, what if the top of the palm tree has been cut off? So like, why would you go up the palm tree if there's no dates up there? So if the dates have been cut off, if the top has been cut off, then what about that? Pligi Rav Acharavina. So there's a machlokas. Chadasar once said, no, you still can't use the wine. In other words, um, you can't use the wine because nobody would go up to the palm tree. But Hanshar and the other would permit the wine because people would go to the tree. Mandi Asar, if you say that the wine is us, or in other words, no one would go up to the tree. Why would you go up? There's no dates to pick, so who's climbing the tree? Uman Deshari, but the other one who permits the wine because people would go on the tree anyway. Why? Zimna de Avdale Behema Vasali Basra. Maybe you're looking for your lost animal, right? And so you want a high vantage point to look around and see if you can find it. So you climb the tree, and if people are still climbing trees, even if the top is cut off, then the idolater will be careful not to mess with the wine because he could
I
be
was I
observed.
was thinking that maybe the animal is up there. A cat climbs up the
Yeah,
tree and can't get
that could be
down.
too.
The
Uh-huh.
fireman has to bring them down with the
Okay.
ladder. But now you climb
Uh-huh.
up the ladder to get your cat.
Yeah. Okay.
No, not the ladder. You climb up the tree to get the cat.
Yeah, that's just as plausible. Tanarama. Whether you are renting or buying a house in the courtyard of a idol worshiper, and he's it's full of wine. This courtyard. V'Yisrael darbo sachaser, and the Jews living there. Mutter, the wine is permitted. Even when you don't have the key. So there's one of the houses in the courtyard is a storehouse for wine. It's locked, but even if you don't have the key, it's fine. In other words, the idol worshiper will be cognizant of people watching him. But if the Jew lives in a different courtyard, next door, like the I mean, we've discussed this many times, but the typical living situation was you have a number of residences around the courtyard, um, and there's many courtyards, neighboring each other. So if the Jew lives in the courtyard next door, mutar, then it's okay. It's still okay for the wine. That's only if that Jew has the key. Again, a Jew is producing wine for an idolater. And there's a Jew living in that courtyard. Mutar, the wine is okay. But only if he has the key. So Amar Rav Yochanan Tana, so Rav Yochanan interrupted Tane Afal Pi Shein Meftech V'Chosim B'Yado Mutar. We just saw a brisa that says if the Jew is in the same courtyard, he doesn't even need a key to make it permissible. So the answer is b'chasar acheres. Um, uh, so he's saying Tane afal pi she'em aftech v'chosim b'yado mutar. You should. He's saying what you should amend your teaching. You should be saying the brisa that even if he has no key, if he's in the where he's living in the same courtyard. Now b'chasar acheres.
What does it mean? Bachotam b'yado, the seal. He seals the.
Oh
What's
yeah,
he
good
referring to?
question. Yeah, I lighted over that. Some kind of access.
He breaks the seal. He has a way to. Is that it,
Yeah, what does it mean by
or
the
he
seal?
himself has the seal, or he puts the.
Um, one second. Should she say anything on this?
Rashi says, "K'shomer hayotze v'nichnas dami damrin b'matnitin shemutin." I don't know what he means.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not clear actually on what the chosam means. Um, maybe it's like I don't know. I mean, we understand the key situation, right?
Yes, that
Obviously.
yes.
it seems to be something similar, some kind of access that you have, but yeah, it's unclear. Good question. Don't know. Um, but let's assume it's some kind of way to access the space. Um, so now the Brisa continues, "B'chaser acheres," if the Jew lives in next door courtyard, also Rafa Pisha Meftech V'chos B'yada, then even if he has the key, it's no good. Divrei Rav Meir, that says Rav Meir, which contradicts what we said before. B'chachamim osrim ad sheyeh shomer yoshev u'mishamer, and the Chachamim say they agree with Rav Meir. It's usher even if you have the key, but you can alleviate the problem by having a shomer, having a guard, a Jewish guard. Oh, ad sheyavo mamuna haba liktzisin, or there's some kind of inspector that comes at set times to see that everything's in order. Now,
And
Chachamim,
this
so we
is
have a
even
number
if
of
he has
questions.
the key? So
Pardon me?
is that even if he has the key?
Yes. According to this
So
brisa, even if you have the key, if you're not in the same courtyard, maybe the idea is that the guy, by the time if you start setting out from your courtyard to the other courtyard with your key in hand, the guy has enough time to see you coming, or something like that.
so then you need the shomer, even if you
Yeah.
even if
Right.
you have the key.
Right. Okay, so now we're going to get a little deeper into this. Chachamim Ahai. When the Chachamim say you need a watchman or an inspector, what do they mean? Ilay Masefa, if they're talking about the last part of the brisa, which is talking about where the only Jew, the closest Jew is next door. So Tanakama Name Meser Chaser. Tanakama also said, Reb Meir, who they're arguing with, also says that it's Aser. So they agree, right? They're not arguing. El Aresha the Seifa. We must be talking about the first part of the Seifa, which is where the wine is in, where the Jew is in the same courtyard, right? V'ha kamer Rabbi Yochanan v'Tana, Tana yafa pishein mafteh v'chosim biyada. But Rabbi Yochanan said about this that you're not that the correct way to read this part of the brisa is there's a local resident of the same courtyard doesn't even need a key, right? So then what do you need? What do you need uh,
Shomer.
yeah, what do you need a shomer for? Vela Sefer Dereisha must be the end of the first part, which is which is that if it's a Jew's wine in the idolater's courtyard and there's no Jewish resident, Tekamer Tanakama b'chatzar acheres mutar, v'hu shem maftech v'chosim biyada. Tanakama says if the Jew lives next door in the next courtyard, then it's permissible only if he has a key, right? And the Chachamim say, "Leolam asur ad sheisham yoshev u'mishamer." That no, even if he has a key, having a key is not sufficient. You still have to have a guard, or an inspector. Okay, fine. Now,
Well, Meir said that, didn't he say that? And the
no,
Chachamim,
Rameir says, I don't know. Yeah, so we're talking, but Rameir is talking about if it's a non-Jew's wine, and here we're talking about if it's the Jew's wine.
non-Jewish wine. Why is it even an issue if it's a non-Jewish wine? You can't.
If it was made by a Jew, like this is the situation we've been discussing,
Oh, so it's
in this
made
whole
by a Jew,
context.
but it's
Yeah, so it's
non-Jewish
different.
wine.
And it's different because like whose wine is it? So the guy, if it's his wine, he feels more control over it. If it's the Jew's wine, maybe he doesn't feel so much in control. So you don't have to be so careful, according to the Chachamim, about his access to it.
Doesn't
Now,
have to. Well, I thought he has to be more careful
no, if it
because
belongs to, did I say that wrong? If it belongs to him, then he's more liberal with what he's going to do. It's like my wine. I'll go and touch it whenever I want, right? But
right.
if it's the Jew's wine, then, maybe he'll sue me for touching his wine and making it non-kosher. So he's less likely to access the wine. So then we
So,
say, um,
so then the Chachamim
so then the
say you
Chachamim say that you still need the the Tanakhama says it's okay, and the Chachamim say no, you still need a watchman. They don't buy the distinction between the Jews wine and the non-Jews wine.
and on the Chachamim say it's always Asur. Is that what we're saying? Unless there's a
Yeah,
watchman.
unless you have a watchman or inspector.
And Reb Meir seems to say it's only in the case of the
If
non-Jewish
it
one.
Right, because then he's more free to access, he feels more free to access his own wine.
But he would
Now,
hold that the Jews wine, that he even if
yeah,
he
if
lives
it's
next
the Jews'
door,
wine, then you need less protection because it's not the Ovid Kochavim's wine, so he's less likely to take liberties.
even if he lives next door and he's not in the same courtyard, they're not. I mean, why would that change? They if it's in the go if in the non-Jews courtyard and the Jew lives next door, why would that change the perception of what the non-Jew thinks he could do? Because
Well,
the Jews,
I think because if he could, it's all economic, right? It's all like, what's he afraid of? The only thing he's afraid of is economic losses, right? So if it's his wine, um, and people see that it's not kosher, well, he can still sell it to non-Jews, right?
right?
But if it's the Jew's wine and the Jew says, "Who am I going to sell this wine to? I made kosher wine. I'm going to sue you because you messed up my wine." This is what I'm assuming, right? That what he's afraid of is being sued by the Jew who owns the wine for damages.
Uh-huh. All right.
Okay, so we said Mumuna Balakisim. So one of the alternatives was either a watchman or an inspector that comes at certain intervals. So Griusahu, Sigmar says, well, that's no good. If you know when the guy's going to only come on Tuesdays and Thursdays, then Monday, Wednesday, and Friday you're in the clear, right? So you said that it's an inspector that comes regularly. Well, so then you have to worry about the times that he's not scheduled to come, right? Ella, so Gemara is going to modify it. Achiav Mamuna She'ein Balakitzin. We're talking about no, an inspector that comes on surprise visits, not on regular visits, not on
I thought
regular.
that's what we understood before. Yotzi v'nichnas. He comes when he pleases, the inspector.
No, when we said, but one of the statements we had was Mamuna Balakitzin. Um, Yeah, Yosef and Nichnas is the same thing. Well, okay, the Shomer we talked about Yosef and Nichnas, right? The guard who like he comes and goes, but then we also introduced this idea of an inspector, and the way it was stated before was an inspector who comes on scheduled visits. Well,
Uh-huh.
that doesn't help me. So
Right.
that's why the Gemara says no. We're talking about an inspector who comes on surprise visits. So then you always have to be careful not
Right.
to
I
be
mean,
messing with the wine because you could get the inspector.
I
So
thought that
then the
was
inspector and the watchman and watchman who's Yosef and Nichnas is essentially the same thing.
I thought it was implicit that Yotzi v'nichnas. He comes when it inspect. But okay, I didn't recall that the Gemara said Nikitzim. It
Yeah,
just
well, when we talked
seemed
about the Shomer, we said Yosef and Nichnas, but when we introduced the idea of the Mamuna, who's the
right.
inspector, not the watchman, but the inspector,
Okay.
then we stated Habalakitin that he comes on scheduled visits. So now the Gemara
Okay.
says no, that's actually wrong. That it has to be an inspector who comes on surprise
Right.
visits.
Right.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so then it's effectively the same thing as the Yosef and Nichnas Shomer. Okay, next thing from the Mishnah, Rabbi Shimon ben Lazar Omer Rishusav de Kochavim Achasi. So this was a cryptic statement we're going to examine. What we're talking about is the Jew who's hired to produce wine for the Ovid Kochavim as kosher wine, but it's stored in the owner's warehouse. Okay. So they asked Rabbi Shimon Lazar lahakel or lahachmir. Is he being makel or machmir? Um, so how would that work? If he's being makel, then so the Tanakama is saying that the if it's a city that's all of idolaters, then it doesn't matter whose warehouse it's being stored in, whether it's the wine owner or if he stores it in his friend's warehouse, right, his neighbor's warehouse. Um, either way, it's usher, um, and so in that case, so Rav Shimon ben Elazar is saying as a question, what you think that all properties are the same? Um, in other words, if it's in his own warehouse, then yes, he feels like at liberty, right? But um, but if it's in somebody else's warehouse, then the other guy is not gonna, then we're worried about the owner of the warehouse, not the owner of the wine, and he's going to be careful not to mess up the other guy's wine, right? So in other words, if you store stuff at the U-Haul facility, the U-Haul people are not going to go and mess with your stuff because you're going to sue them. Um,
Is that
so
Mako?
that would be when Rav Shimon ben Lazar is saying to be makel, that the if it's stored in somebody else's warehouse, then we don't suspect the warehouse owner of messing with the wine. But so Rav Hila Ziri Lahakim. But Rav Nachman Amar Ziri, but Rav Nachman said in the name Ziri Lahachmir that he's being strict. In other words, the Mishnah would say that that the Mishnah is saying that it's only in the wine owner's own warehouse. That's where we say it is it's usher. Um, and Rav Shimon ben Lazar is saying that no, not only that, even if it's stored in somebody else's warehouse, another idolater's warehouse, it's still usher because Rishus of the Kochavim Echadu, because they're all kind of co-conspirators. Um, there's no there's no distinction. We'll see why in a minute. Um, so Rabbi Yehuda Amar Zir Lahakel Vachi Kamar Tanakama. This is what I just explained. That the Tanakama is saying Kashem Sheb Shuso Asur Kach V'Shuso V'Kochavim Acher Nami Asur. So in this view, it doesn't matter whose warehouse it's in, the owners or somebody or his friends. V'Chashinu L'Gomlim, because we're they do each other favors, right? It's like, okay, um, um, they will grant each other access to the warehouse to make the wine yayin nesach because they expect the same thing to be done for them. And Rabbi Shimon ben Lazar Omer, so Rabbi Shimon says, but no, we're only going to say it's also if it's his own warehouse. We're not going to extend this to somebody else's warehouse. We're not worried about these reciprocal arrangements. If somebody owns a warehouse, he's not going to grant access to the to the customers except under controlled conditions. And if you say the other way that it's that Rav Shimon ben Lazar is more machmir, this is what the Tanakama is saying. But when do we say the wine is also if it's in his own warehouse? But in somebody else's warehouse, we're not worried because he's not going to grant him access. We're not worried about this, this informal reciprocal arrangements. But Rav Shimon ben Lazar Omer, Kol Rishus Avdei Kochavim Achasi. Rabbi Shimon ben Lazar says no. We do worry about them reciprocating for each other, and we do worry about the Ayin Nesach, even if the owner has to go and access the other guy's warehouse, his neighbor's warehouse. Okay. We have a support for this idea that Rav Shimon is being machmir. Amar Shimon ben Lazar, Kol Rishus Kochavim Achasim Mipnei Haramoni. We have another statement where he's saying all of we can consider them all to be one big cooperative of warehouses because of because they're going to cheat, right? In other words, the same idea, gomlin, right? That they're going to allow illicit access to each other as a courtesy, a reciprocal courtesy. Devei parzak rufila usivu chamar gabe arisayu. So here's a case in point. In the house of Parzak, he was a government official. They stored kosher wine. Um, um, they stored kosher wine at the home or property of a sharecropper or something that was under control of a sharecropper. Several the rabbis thought, when are we concerned about reciprocal access? That's if they're truly reciprocal. There's no power. Clearly the government official has more power than the sharecropper, and he's like, "Listen, you're going to store my wine for me." The guy's got no choice, but it doesn't work the other way, right? The sharecropper has no expectation that he's going to go to the government official and say, "You're going to store my wine." That's never going to happen. So there's no courtesy reciprocation here. Hacha keva darise love darkilo sive beparzakofila. Since the sharecropper is never going to store things with the government official, then there's no reciprocation.
That's an
Rava says
exclusive
Adrabah.
case,
Yeah.
right? Isn't that an exclusive case? I mean, average, so it's a government official, but two neighbors, two average
Yeah,
individuals.
exactly. So we're dealing with a specific case here, right? Exactly. We've got the principle already, but here's a case where it wouldn't apply because there's no reciprocation, as you say. But Amar Rava, Rava says Adarabba, it's the opposite. Afilu on the Amar lo chashin legolin, even if you say we're not concerned about reciprocation, that everybody will keep control over their own warehouse. When is the sharecropper going to keep out the government official? Only if they're peers. But hacha, kevin the mir the sharecropper is under the control of the government official. He's not going to be able to keep him out of the warehouse. He's gonna not only will he allow him access, he'll even say, "I never let him in," or testify that because it's even worse because he's definitely going to let him in. He might even cover for him and say, "Oh, he never messed with the wine." So, um, so in that case, Rava is saying it's even worse. How Karcha de Haviyasiv Bechamer Yisrael? There was a city where there was kosher wine being stored. Ishtachach Ovid Kochavim de Havakai Bene Dane. And then they found an idol worshiper wandering around the warehouse. Marava Im Nispas Alav Kaganav. If it's like if he was acting in such a way that he would have been charged with theft or with damage to the wine. In other words, he was surreptitiously going around and blessing the wine and using it for Avodah Zarah. Then and so he would have basically, if he were caught, then he would suffer economic consequences. Chamashari, then the wine is okay. Love, but if it's the case where he wouldn't have suffered any consequences, then the wine is also. Honor Lachar Bishmo, finish the parak, and tomorrow we will begin the fifth parak of Socher Sapah.
I mean, we're assuming, I guess, that these two neighbors, friends, different owners of the factory, are just dealing with wine. But if the owner if one of the owners had wine and he had corn and he had
Yeah, yeah,
pickled
whatever.
herring and he had
You know.
bread,
Yeah,
books
yeah,
and so
whatever.
forth, he probably wouldn't collude. He would not let him in because he said, listen, it's wine's one thing, but I don't want you touching my books and my corn and so forth. So
Right. So it's all situation dependent. Exactly. If there's reason to believe that it's innocent, then or that not that it's innocent, but that he could suffer consequences, then we would say the wine is mutter.
yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah.
thinking.
And obviously, this has great implications for the modern kosher food industry, right? It's like you'll have to figure out when is it. I don't know if it's Nesach is exactly the same as kashrus, but but the idea of being suffering economic consequences if you're caught cheating, is an important concept. Okay, we'll pick it up tomorrow. Have a good day, everybody.